Welcome everybody back here at Veil of Sound. Yes, another Christmas Day interview here on our little show. And I'm very, very happy to tune up the volume a little bit with a wonderful musician. And I first want to ask everyone out there, what do AC/DC, Oasis, and this guy have in common? They all have a sibling in the band. James from Rolo Tomassi. Thanks for joining.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. We will be talking about the new single that dropped today, November 7th, by Tane.
Tane,
We'll
yeah.
all and we'll also, of course, be talking about the development of the band and about the live album that you dropped a few months ago, live at the Electric Ballroom. But the first question that we always have here on our show is, James, do you have any kind of band merch, shirt, vinyl, whatever, of your band or of any other band that you want to plug right now today? I'll give you a moment. I also always plug something, and I plug the wonderful Cortex Records in
Fantastic.
Berlin. It's a
That's lovely.
wonderful, chaotic, anarchistic record shop.
I've
If you're
been.
ever in Berlin, you've been
I've,
there?
of course, yeah. Do I have anything I want to plug? Not really. I mean, I'm wearing just a plain black t-shirt today. My vinyl collection is facing me, so there's nothing that's within arm's length that I can just grab quickly without going off camera. And it would take
What
me a
was the
minute.
last record you bought?
The last record that I bought, I got a repress of Rival Schools United by Fate.
Ooh.
I'm in a very sort of slow process of looking to replace my entire CD collection, like especially like the kind of records that are my favorite, and make sure I've got copies of them on vinyl. And it's going to take me, probably the next 20 to 30 years. But that was something that got repressed earlier this year. I pre-ordered it and it arrived not very long ago. So that's still the most recent thing that I've bought. Well, a new record that's come into my possession anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a really great record. I was fortunate enough to see them twice. It's a great band. But I mean, like, it's Schreifeld's. How could it be any bad?
I know the man's
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's really a genius. James, where are we catching you right now? Where are you?
I am at home in Brighton, the south coast of England. So yeah, this is
I
coming live from my flat. I moved in a few weeks ago, which is why it's kind of there's nothing on the wall behind me or anything, and why before we started recording there was a load of clothes drying in the background. We're still kind of figuring out the perfect layout for the living room, but we'll get there. Yeah.
So is Rolo Tomassi now also in a way relocating, or do you meet every so often?
Well, we all live in different cities, so there
Yeah.
was a period of time when everyone was in Brighton. Um, for the moment, it's myself and Nathan, our bass player, that live here. Chris is in London. Al lives in a town called Basingstoke, and Eva is in the US. So we've roughly been based in the south of England. All of our stuff is in Brighton. We have like a space where everything is set up. So I guess the band is sort of based out of Brighton for all intents and purposes.
How does it feel that the sister lives in the US?
I mean, at this point, like normal. She's been there 6 years now.
Yeah.
So
When she got married, didn't wasn't it?
that's right.
Or
Yeah. Yeah. So I've just gotten used to it. Yeah, she was here. She was here in Brighton before she left. And yeah, I don't know. I can't really. It's just normal. Yeah.
I also ask that because I mean everybody knows that you and Aoife have been making music together since you were teenagers,
hmm
more or less. So was that something where you also feared for the band, or was it clear, she's just gonna be in the US, and when we need her, she'll be here?
Exactly that. Yeah. I think before she left, we kind of talked about how much everyone wanted to tour and the sort of potential barriers it put up with either being in the US. But ultimately, it's just meant that we either tour and we play shows or we don't. There's just no like
Yeah.
one-offs, and
Yeah.
that is maybe a good thing. I guess it means we think way more about the sort of shows we want to say yes to and how we're going to plan our touring and it makes it easier to kind of compartmentalize the band from the rest of your life. So I think it's a good thing. I'm trying to say it's a good thing anyway.
I'm trying to think. It sounds like I have to get it in my head, but it's a good.
Mm.
Yes, but could it also be that it then makes the time that you spend as a band writing, recording, touring, even more appreciated?
Oh, definitely. I think that's very true. And yeah, it just means that when we do get those moments when we are away, because I guess we're not seeing either sort of frequently, like sort of on a social level, you do definitely appreciate everyone's company.
Mm.
It's kind of it's more of a rarity that we're all in the same place. So yeah, feels good. It's nice.
And it probably also says for the band that, okay, when we do this, we have to do it right.
Yeah, exactly. I think because there's so many moving parts that go into a tour even happening, you know, you even more so you want it to be the best version of itself.
And when you are recording, will Eva do her vocals in the US or will she fly over to England?
So the last record that we did, the last studio album, When Myth Becomes Memory, the vocals for that were all tracked in the US.
Mhm.
That was more sort of a product of the pandemic and the
Yeah.
travel restrictions that were in place at the
Mhm.
time. But I think because we found a way of making it work, and because the studio that Eva tracked the vocals at is a really short commute from where she lives, it would probably just make sense to do the same thing again. Just in terms of just the ease and the comfort of getting it done. I think it was something that yeah, she got built up a really good rapport with the engineer that she tracked the vocals with. The studio's nice, the conditions are easy, there's no jet lag. It's yeah, and for a very long time, I think the process that we have of putting the vocals and the lyrics to music, it was kind of a little bit detached from writing the music anyway, so it wasn't almost an entirely new kind of experience. So it
That was
works.
some, but I was just about to ask. I guess, with her being the vocalist, it makes it a little bit easier as if she was, for example, the drummer. I can
Right.
see that. But how do you then go about writing songs? Do you set like pauses where you say like, okay, sis, here, this is where you should go nuts, and here, this is where you should put in this or that?
I think sometimes we definitely are writing music with a vocal in mind. It's not
Mhm.
like we're going to write something that sounds good instrumentally and then say like we'll do what you want. It's we're a band that has a vocalist, and I think the vocals, definitely the clean vocals, are sort of very integral parts to what
Yeah.
makes the song stick with someone or mean to someone. And I think we've always been very intentional with the use of dynamics and things like that. And I think it's kind of, yeah, we've been doing it for such a long time that we know where to leave space for vocals, how something should go. And we, throughout the writing process, we're demoing music really comprehensively, so that it's never that we would write some music, go into the studio, record the finished thing, and then say to Eva, "How about it?" She's been involved the entire process,
Mhm.
and may
Yeah.
have been multiple versions of a song, and she may have given like feedback on what she liked and disliked about something, and how it may not work as well with vocals, and everyone's got their opportunity to kind of have their input on the creative side of it, as we're kind of going along with that. So it's a long process. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You have been speaking about time. I think I'm right when I say that Rolo Tomassi is now in the 20th year of existence, isn't it?
We have our 20th birthday in February 2025. Yeah. So yeah.
So when this comes out, it's only a few weeks away. How does that feel? 20 years in a band.
It feels cool. I mean, I'm really, really excited that we're still doing it, and that it's still something that is important and to me, and I think to some other people as well, and also that we're kind of putting out now. It feels like the material that's coming out is the stuff that's really resonating the most with the crowd that we have. I think it would feel different if we were just kind of like, we'd released one record that people liked 20 years ago and we were just kind of getting together to do that. every 5 years or something. It's nice that we're kind of able to reach this milestone, and it still feels that there's relevance to what we're doing, and there's maybe even excitement about what we might do next. I think we're all really proud to have kind of got to this point, and it's nice that we're gonna get to celebrate that with some shows next year.
When we're talking about, 20 years of existence, the record collector in me has to ask, which demo did you put out first? The one with coats within coats, or the demo which starts with, breathing through a city? Because I found one of these a few years ago, and now I just want to know, have I got the first or the second Rolo Tomassi demo?
The one with breathing through a city is the first one. It's a 3-track demo. It was like a CDR that we released ourselves and recorded like on an 8-track ourselves as well.
Okay. You had a knack, especially at the beginning, also for trying to go for new formats. You have a credit card release.
Yeah, I found these like square, like credit card shaped CDs, and they would only fit.
Yeah, yeah.
They would only fit in certain CD trays. It was really awkward. I think I was a really big fan of bands like The Locust and Das Oath and He Who Corrupts, and all of those bands would sort of, it kind of felt like almost intentionally release music on slightly obscure formats, and I really like that. I think it it made people work a little bit harder, and it kind of was just something fun to do.
When you say The Locust, I still remember. I also have a few of their records, and the one I love most is the puzzle thing, where you have 4 7-inch inches, and then you have to put them together. That's like really fun, and I love when bands put thought and effort into that, and that is also something that one could always say about Rolo. It was never a band that did something. He never did something half-assedly. It was always like, we do this correctly. Something that I always felt is that you have a very international sound. It's not something that you would pinpoint to the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that is not something that you set out to do, but do you also feel it that way?
Definitely.
That you're not a very British band?
For sure. I think so many of the bands that were really key influences when we started and now are international bands, like a lot of US bands. I kind of think that the kind of technical, progressive, hardcore, noisecore, whatever you want to call it, is definitely something that was really kind of the early starts of that scene, if it even is one, is very US centric as far as I'm concerned. Like, places like San Diego, which Locust came from, and then Seattle with the Blood Brothers, and then the Dillinger Escape Plan in its early kind of iterations, and then for me as well, like a lot of European bands, admittedly, like La Quiete, Rain. I mentioned Das Oath earlier, like that band as well, which had people from the Netherlands and the US. I think I was just really kind of taken with that sound, and I think ultimately, there wasn't a heap of bands in the UK kind of doing or making the music that I wanted to hear. And I think everything we've done has always just been a little bit of a mirror to its influences, and almost like kind of slightly pastiche on that. And it's good in a way that it's meant that we've been able to kind of travel, and it kind of makes sense in the context of international audiences. Meant that we maybe had to work a little bit harder in the UK to kind of convince people that we were good and worth seeing. But
it's interesting. There are still not a lot of UK bands that sound like Rolo Tomassi. I mean, there have been a lot of people who try to put you and, for example, also Svalbard into that holy roar category, but that in itself was never a similar sound, and it's very interesting still to this day. I think that Rolo Tomassi doesn't, first of all, in some ways it doesn't fit any scene. And at the same time, because of not being able to pinpoint you can be a part of every scene. Did that help with touring?
Yes and no. I think it meant that when we played with bands that it worked with, it really worked. But then we'd do other shows where we'd go and like play with an indie band or something, and on paper like it sounded like a great opportunity, but the reality of it was we were playing to a room full of confused people that were going to buy a ticket regardless or not of whether we were there.
Yeah.
And while at the time it felt like a cool thing that we would get to play some of these bigger shows, I'm not ultimately sure who got what out of it. Basically,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to have the experience of playing a bigger venue or whatever, and maybe expose people to slightly different music, but even that feels like slightly arrogant, like, oh, we're going to show you how great this is or whatever. I think it definitely kind of hardened us as performers. And the same goes for festivals, really. Like, I think there are so many music festivals, but there are the amount of specialist music festivals that a band like ours can do is slightly more limited. So we've had some opportunities to play some unbelievable festivals. And some of them have been great, and some of them have, again, like, I don't want to say felt like a waste of time, but like there've been challenging days where you kind of come off and you're like, why did we come and do that? Like, we should have just gone and played a club show to people that are into it, that care. But yeah, there's definitely like positives and negatives to sounding the way that we do, but I think over time we eked out our own kind of space in the world, found our audience, and now we're able to kind of like talk consistently as a headliner and know that we'll have a crowd in like the places where it works, and that's a really, really cool thing. I think we've just become slightly more selective over the years, which again is a good thing. I think going back to what I was saying, we would used to say yes to basically everything, and that would lead to some interesting results sometimes. But yeah.
Was there any festival or billing where you said like, oh, that might, where you were skeptical and then it turned out really well?
Great question.
Thank you.
I mean, the answer to that is like probably, but I'm just trying to remember, 15 years worth of festivals, summers.
Yeah.
It's
Or any touring where you said like, okay, we'll do this, but we ain't sure if this really works.
I mean, there's definitely been plenty of that. But I can't remember if any of them were like, any of them worked out better or worse than we thought.
We don't want to hear about the worst because there is already enough bad stuff in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's come to the new record, Live at Electric Ballroom. For everybody who has not heard about it, it's been released on MNRK Records on September 29th, so it's already a few months old by now. It's not the first time that you released live music, but I think, if I'm correct, it's the first full length, isn't it?
So we released some live sessions that we did for the BBC.
The BBC sessions, yes, right.
Which wasn't necessarily like a concert. This is the first sort of live album of a concert that happened with an audience there. Which is kind of slightly different in terms of its approach. We were very much involved in the kind of the mixing of the live show after the fact, like for release. We used Lewis Johns, who has been our producer for the last like 3 full lengths that we've done. So it only felt right that Lewis is this person that's like really been pivotal in kind of capturing the sound that we have and sculpting what that actually is to us and to other people. Having him involved in mixing the audio for the live release was like a really big decision. I guess in terms of the decision to do a live album, we were really, really happy with the set we were touring, the material. We felt it was kind of the best version of our band that we've kind of ever been. And this London show is the biggest headline show we've ever done. We were touring with like production, in that we'd had these bespoke visuals designed by an artist called Simon Moody, who's done all of our album artwork. So it was very sort of tied in thematically to the songs. We had it projected behind us on a really big screen. And it was a very special night for the band, and we're lucky that Al, our drummer, he's a freelance filmmaker, so he had a lot of friends that he could kind of call on to come and shoot the show. He's edited it, all the footage himself, and yeah, it feels really cool. Like I'm not sure I ever kind of anticipated we would do like a live album in the traditional sense, but I think on this point we're just kind of, we're on bonus round as a band. It's cool to do these little things that you don't going to do, and we've got 6 full-length studio albums. I think a live album it makes sense. Yeah.
You just brought up another point. You have 6 full lengths, but the live album definitely concentrates on the set list of the live album concentrates on the last 3 records, on grievances, on time, and where myth becomes I forgot it. Myth becomes, tell me. Memory. Sorry, old man. Was that also something very intentional to focus on those 3 records?
Yeah, definitely. I think firstly, it's the material that we like the most. We think is like best representative of the direction the band has taken. And I think we kind of approach putting together a live set the same way we approach putting together an album, in that we want it to be coherent and cohesive. And I think some of the earlier tracks would just sound really out of place in the context of the material we're playing currently. So ultimately we were touring Where Myth Becomes Memory at this point, so the set is really heavily weighted in favor of that. It was like a tour promoting that record, and the material that sits best along that is from those other records that you mentioned. It's kind of where we're at with it. Like it's the material we're happiest with playing, and we think it kind of makes a really just strong statement altogether.
Is it true what I've read in a certain place that for you, those 3 records also feel like an unintended trilogy?
Definitely. I think it was something when we were coming to the end of the recording process of the last record, when we were looking through things like the lyrical themes in particular, it kind of felt that they were sort of all just linked. Maybe somehow, maybe we were kind of looking for something that wasn't really there. But I definitely think there's almost kind of like two iterations of the band, and there's the one that kind of came before these 3 records, where there was a slightly different lineup on the first 2, and then the third record was a new group of people trying to work out how to write music together and decide which way they wanted to kind of take it in together. And it kind of felt that it was Grievances where that really, really gelled, and we kind of went from strength to strength on the next 2. And I think if you listen through all 3 of them, you can feel the trajectory and hear the sound kind of evolve as it goes. And I think that in itself kind of makes them all feel tied together, to me at least. And then, as I said, I think just the lyrical themes across all of them, and the way that it starts out kind of being slightly more bleak and ends up on a much more kind of hopeful, resolute note by the end of it.
Yeah. When I've read that, I've also listened to all 3 records again. And yes, it's especially in a sound idea, it's very, very interesting that one can hear that. And when I looked at the lyrics, yes, there are like threads going through those records. But you have mentioned it, or we said it, it's an unintended thing. Do you believe in something like subconscious, that subconsciously build those connections, or is it pure incident?
I think maybe it's subconscious. I think when you're working on kind of large scale projects, especially with words, whether that's like books, lyrics, poems, etc., there's always going to be things that you come back to and themes that you identify with, and whether that's turns of phrase or specific words. I mean, I think throughout all the records we've done, we've always kind of dealt with like slight dualisms. Like there's loads of references to dark and light throughout everything. And I think that almost just, maybe it's subconscious, maybe it is just sort of, it becomes this style over the period of time, especially when you've been doing it for so long. And again, you said there's like sort of little threads and things. I think one thing that I've always been a big fan of bands doing is making little references to previous work they've done, whether that's like callbacks to previous songs or lyrics with references in new lyrics, especially when you yourself know that the two things are related. I think it's I like leaving those kind of little Easter eggs in there for people that are maybe a bit more eagle-eyed or like kind of are into the detail. It's something that I, as a music fan, really, really like. So I've kind of always wanted to put a bit of the things I enjoy about music into the music that I'm making.
Then you must enjoy a band like Touche Amore, who on their first records, always the last sentence was the title of the next record.
Yeah, exactly. Circle Takes the Square are the same,
Yeah.
and yeah, bands like that. I think it's I like it. Yeah, I'm a fan.
I've always called that the James Bond ending, where you basically know what you'll get next.
It's a cool way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you've already mentioned now when you are touring, you're the major touring partner. You've done a lot of split records over the years. Not so many in like the last few years, but you've done a lot of those. And I mean, like, of course, at the beginning, Rolo Tomassi was not the major partner on those splits or collaborations. Um, do you have a band where you say, like, okay, that would be a band that I'd still love to do a split with? And please don't say Dillinger and Converge. Those are the obvious choices.
A band that I would love to do a split with. Great question again. Let's go with. I mean, they've just recently reformed to do some shows, so I'll pick the Blood Brothers. I mentioned them before.
I was just worried with that intro that you'd say Oasis.
Oh well, I mean, if they want to do it, like I'm keen, but I think the Blood Brothers might make a bit more sense.
Yeah, that would be a dream come true. And to be honest, if you did a show with Blood Brothers in the UK, I'd be flying over.
Yeah, I mean,
for hell, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you played with them before?
No, never. I think so I want to say that they maybe stopped playing shows only a few years into us being a band, really. Maybe it was like 2009. I've never even seen them. I missed them when they played the UK. I know that Eva went and saw them, and for some reason I wasn't at the show that she went to. I grew up in Sheffield, and I remember they did a show there, and it was 18 plus, and I was 17 at the time, so I couldn't go. So I'm just crossing my fingers that I'm going to get to see them full stop next year. We'll see.
I'm just trying to find out when they stopped. Let's see what the stupid internet tells us. Oh yeah, it was Young Mercedes, and that was 2006.
Right.
Their last record. Yeah. Yeah, you were just a few years old as a band, not even years. Yeah, I can see that. And is there any of those split records where you say, like, I was surprised that this really happened, where maybe you at the beginning said, like, oh, that would be so cool, but I ain't sure. I mean, like, we all know that everybody's making projects, making plans, and then they fall short at a certain time.
Well, actually, this brings us back full circle to a question you asked earlier. The one that I still can't believe happened, and this is because I love both of these bands. We toured with the Bronx and the Fucked Up, and there's a split 7-inch that got released as part of that tour. And again, that was one of those things where we got asked to do that tour. I can see how that makes sense with both of those bands playing together, but us being the opener, it's kind of like, is this going to work? Is anyone going to like this? And those two bands were so cool to tour with. They were such awesome people. Like I said, I like them both anyway. So the fact that we ever released with those two bands, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's also, as you say, it's like one of those splits where you're like, is this really going to work? And I'm very happy to say I got that one.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been following you for years now. Yeah, it's one that really works. And the one where I was thinking, well, will this work in this context, was for Bronx. But it really works. It's a fascinating way. Let's talk a little bit about the song that dropped today, Fear, which is Tane, Rolo Tomassi, and you are also singularly credited. I mean, like, it's a very interesting track. It's for everybody out there. It reminds me a lot of Health.
Yeah.
Um, so it's this like industrial pop metal in a way, for lack of a better word. How did that happen?
So
I mean, like, first of all, I guess they approached you.
yeah, so I've known Matt, who is Tane, who's like the songwriter and main kind of driving force behind the band for probably for a few years now. Um, they'd finished the record earlier in the year, and I've heard it, and it's awesome. And they were kind of like, I guess, putting the finishing touches on a few tracks, and I think they were just looking for some people to kind of to guest on the record, just to give it maybe slightly different feel. And he just asked if I would be up for singing on one of the songs. I got the choice of a couple of different songs actually, and this was one when I got sort of an advanced listen of the record, one that really jumped out to me. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm credited and our band is credited, but the
Yes.
only involvement is me doing just vocals on the record. I think they're
So
probably
you get like royalties twice.
fingers crossed. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but
But yeah,
it's really cool.
it was really fun. Yeah, we went up to the studio in London where they'd been recording it, and it was just like all done in one evening. And then we went for beers and pizza afterwards. It was yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, I'm looking forward to people hearing the full length. It's a really really cool record, and the band is awesome live.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
also not the first single that they put out. I mean, like, I've seen you being on it, and then I listened to that one first, and I think there is another one or two out there. But are also, for everybody who likes Health, you will like Tane. I'm very, very sure. Very,
Definitely.
very, there's definitely a lot of, but you yourself are only on that one track, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think there were a few guests over the course of the record. The singer from the band Cage Fight was on the first single that came out. I have a feeling there's one more. But yeah, I was very flattered to be asked. It's fun just to go and shout into a microphone for a bit. Yeah, and be directed as well. I think with our band, I feel so precious about all the songwriting, and I'm very sort of involved in it. And it was nice going in. The song was written. They knew what they wanted me to do with
Yeah.
vocals, so I could just kind of go in and do that, and that was quite refreshing. Yeah.
When you say shouting, is the legend true that you and Aoife practiced screaming in the car along to music?
Yeah.
Were you afraid that mom and dad would hear you and would call the exorcist?
I don't really know why we thought it was a good idea. I mean, I think it was I remember being sat outside like a supermarket or something. We were just in the car and we were listening to something and we just decided to kind of try it. It's one of those things, I guess there's never like, I can't remember thinking back to like the first instance of having hearing music like that and being like, well, I've got to try and do this. Like it needs to
Mm,
be kind of needs to be in a protected space or something like that. And a car felt as good as a good a place as any.
yeah.
Like maybe we locked the doors so no one could come in and just leave us to it rather than someone busting in your bedroom asking what's going on. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can also still imagine that, people at Costco walking by and like, what are those
Maybe.
two doing? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you and your sister are now making music for several decades. How does that feel?
What the fact that I'm making music with my sister.
Yeah.
To be honest, like normal. I've been playing in bands with Eva since I was like 14, so I don't really know any different. It's not like I've done many or any musical projects without her at this point. So to me, it's how it's always been. So yeah, just quite normal. Yeah. I'm
Could you
sorry to have a
imagine?
more interesting
No,
answer.
no, no,
Yeah.
that's totally cool. But then the question is, could you imagine doing music without Eva? And I'm not talking about doing vocals on a song, but like a record.
Possibly. I mean, I think the longer things go on and the more people's tastes change and maybe they want to do something that's like focused on one area of the sound that we have and it maybe wouldn't be right to do it with Rolo. I definitely want to continue to feel creatively fulfilled. And if I needed to do that with other musicians or on my own or in a different setting, like, yeah, I would do it. It would definitely be different because I think, throughout the years, rather than, I know that some bands do kind of go off and have side projects and that sort of thing. My approach has always been that I don't want to dilute anything that we do, and if someone was to go away and focus on one thing, like I just mentioned, maybe it would change the way that our band sounded, and we'd sort of be taking out some of the things that make it interesting. But yeah, I would never rule it out, and I can imagine doing it for sure.
You have mentioned that, musical influences and directions change. Do you notice any change in the music that you listen to for the last 20 years? Because I do. I do notice a very, very clear change in my musical taste.
Of course, and I mean I think it's always funny when you'll announce a tour date or this kind of something like that, and someone will comment like, "Play this song from your the second EP that you put out like 20 years ago."
Yeah,
it's like, well, we did play it a lot at the time, but our tastes have changed. 20 years have happened, and this is what we want to play. And I think that is very much because, yeah, we listen to different music. People's tastes changed. What they want in terms of creative output changes. But yeah, I would say I listen to significantly less heavy music at home, like almost not at all. I listen to way more sort of like ambient and electronic music. I think in terms of heavy music, I just go back to the stuff that I really, really loved. Probably about, I think it kind of, my favorite era of heavy music was maybe, I don't know, towards the end of the 2000s. But the thing that's changed for me mainly is that I'm not sort of listening to just brutal technical music all the time. But I love what I love, and that won't change. So
I have one last question before we come to the infamous quickfire round at the end. And I also look back at stuff, and I see things that I hadn't seen before. And now I have to ask that following question because the football fan in me just pushes this question. On Grievances,
yeah,
the second song is called Raumdeuter.
Yeah.
Is that a reference to one of my all-time favorite football players, Thomas Müller?
Of course, yeah. It was very intentional. And
wonderful. Just go ahead, please.
Of course, for the record, I think he's unbelievable as well. And I can't remember the tournament where he sort of came through. It was his breakthrough. Maybe it was
2010.
2010, okay.
I still remember when Maradona, before the quarterfinals, Maradona said Müller, who's Müller? And then he scored 2 goals against Argentina. Take that, my friend.
And I loved him as a footballer. But I read an interview where someone because the whole Raumdeuter thing, it's a position that was invented for him, right? I think either he tried to explain it in English or someone else tried to explain it, and it was the rough translation was space interpreter. He interprets space on the pitch, and that's how we kind of that's his game. And I thought that was so interesting because a lot of the time with writing music, what we're trying to do is just interpret space within a song. And this song specifically, it stood out a little bit from the rest of the material. And there was a big sort of section in the middle with some arpeggiated synths, and it kind of gets quite big and you can kind of feel the space growing. And I think, so much of what we were doing was trying to interpret space. So I liked that. I'm a massive football fan. So for me, it was just quite funny getting to put a title in like that. And again, I was saying earlier, I knew there would be some people that got it immediately and were like, oh yeah, it's because of Thomas Müller. And I knew that it would probably mean nothing to some people who just thought it was a cool black metal-y sounding song title. And it works both ways. And they're the kind of the best bits where, I don't know, it's not I like having fun like that, and there being a slight injection of humor into what we're doing without being a joke. I don't want people to think everything we do is completely serious and intentioned all the time. Sometimes it is nice to try and be fun in respect.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's a question that I often have with musicians. It's this Zappa question, does humor belong in music? I still say yes. What does not belong into music is, in my opinion, utterly rubbish silliness,
Right. I agree.
but then of course I have to ask, like, favorite football team. And please don't
I'm an
say Man
Arsenal fan.
City. Oh, okay.
No, no, no.
The
Yeah,
Invincibles.
exactly. Yeah.
So how do you
But
feel about Edu moving out?
I was quite surprised to hear that it
Yeah.
had happened, to be honest with you. But they've tripled his salary and can't really blame him, you know? It's
Is it already clear where he's going?
So he is going to be, I don't think it's been announced publicly yet, but the owner of
But
Nottingham Forest, who also
yeah.
owns a team in Greece and I believe a team in Portugal, he's setting up he's going to be heading up the business that he runs, that kind of, he's going to be head of operations for all of the club.
So it's going to
Um,
be like Jurgen Klopp's now doing for not for Salzburg, but for Red
for
Bull.
the Red Bull, yeah, exactly. I think there's going to be more of that in football. Like the City Group exists; they have about 5 clubs. Same for Chelsea. It all feels quite like murky, and I don't really like it. But I mean, if someone came and offered to triple my salary, I'd think about it. You know, like it's
I can understand you, and I totally get that. And I mean, like a lot of Germans will blame me for saying so, but I'm still, for now, nearly 30 years running, a member of Bayern Munich, and I'm
yeah,
still very proud that we can say like we are a club-owned club. I
yeah,
think um, I do not want to see what happens to some of those clubs, like Man City or Newcastle, when the owners move out,
yeah.
because that will at one point or another happen, and the clubs have to be healthy and sustainable
I
before
agree.
that.
Yeah.
So, James, first of all, thanks for that. Thanks for all the insight into. Oh no, I have one question, of course, to ask. New Rolo material when?
There's music that's recorded. We're just finishing the vocals. As previously discussed, it's a bit of a separate process. So it will be released at some point next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dog is just looking at me like you are crazy. Yes, I am. But the end of every interview here at the Veil of Sound is the infamous quickfire round. You will
Okay.
always get two alternatives, have to choose one of them, and give a short explanation for it. And when we talk about bands with siblings, let's start with that. So I'll give you AC/DC. I'll give you two albums, Highway to Hell or Back in Black.
Back in Black.
Mhm. Why?
In terms of the limited knowledge I have on AC/DC, I think I probably know more songs from that record. I think the cover art for it is just really, really hard as well. I think
Yeah.
it's like such a classic visually.
For me, it would also be Back in Black, and also for another reason. It might be the best comeback album ever. You
Cool.
know, having to replace singers, I
Yeah.
think that is definitely something. We have already hinted at the infamous Gallagher brothers, so I'll give you two songs by Oasis: Champagne Supernova versus Wonderwall.
Champagne Supernova, and I think a lot of really kind of big Oasis songs, Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger, have just been sort of not ruined, but like really overplayed by
Yeah.
buskers in public. And I think Champagne Supernova is something that I hear less frequently, and I'm always kind of like quite pleased to hear it when I do.
Yeah,
Whereas
exactly.
yeah, the others I maybe hear a bit too frequently. So I'll go for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, definitely. I definitely see that as well. So you have recorded a live record, or published now.
Mhm.
I'll give you two classic, let's say heavy rock live albums: Deep Purple, Made in Japan versus AC/DC, Live After Death.
I mean,
And you don't even, you can also choose between the bands if you don't know the records.
I don't know either of the records. I'm not going to pretend to be a huge fan of either band. So again, I'll go with AC/DC. I know more of the hits.
It was
Um,
Deep Purple and Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden. Sorry, yeah, and I chose a third option. Um, I'll go with Iron Maiden. Um, I think I've seen them live. I guess maybe slightly more of a connection to them with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about Tane, we said like this is industrial. So I'll give you I think my two favorite industrial acts at the moment: Health versus Offer and Punisher.
I'll go for Health. I've liked that band for a really, really long time. I saw them play some shows on the debut record, and it's been really interesting to see how they've kind of continued to push and evolve over the years. I've got a lot of respect for what they're doing. I think the soundtrack work they've done has been impeccable, and yeah, I think they're real kind of trailblazers in that respect.
And I took something from the Tane press kit, where
Okay.
they definitely all of a sudden came up with a cross reference between Tane and Lady Gaga. So I'll give you Lady Gaga, Bad Romance versus Poker Face.
Bad Romance. I just prefer the hook in the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Poker Face, whenever I hear it now, there's like, have you seen the episode of South Park where Cartman sings Poker Face? I just hear this, I hear it sang in his voice, which has kind of killed the song for me.
No, but I haven't seen that one, but I still remember Cartman doing, what is it? Come Sail Away by Styx. And I'm still like, when I think about it, it still gives me trauma. Not how bad it is, but how close it is to the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, then I got something else. I wanted to give you a different question, but South Park versus Simpsons.
I mean, I would take series 1 to 9 of The Simpsons over anything, but in
Yeah.
terms of like the full catalog, it's got to be South Park. I think it's stayed super relevant. It's only improved as it's gotten older, and it's hard to do that. So it's yeah,
Yeah.
respect.
Although one has to say we don't know what will happen when South Park turns 30 or something like that. Like that is if they ever, but for The Simpsons, I mean, I totally see that. But again, doing a TV show now for what is it? 35 years running?
Yeah.
I think that's still an amazing feat. Um, of course, when listening to your band, a lot of these mathcore references come up. So I'll give you two mathcore bands, and I'll not go for the obvious two.
Okay.
I'll give you Botch versus Coalesce.
Botch easily.
You
Yeah.
haven't
Sorry,
been to a
Coalesce.
Coalesce. You haven't been to a Coalesce show, my friend.
Oh, well, it's true. But yeah, I mean, We Are the Romans is seminal. So it's yeah.
Yeah. What I like about both bands that both have flawless discographies.
Yeah.
And the last one, and I
Okay.
took that from your band name. Oh, I basically have two because of your band name. The first one is easy: LA Confidential versus Chinatown.
LA Confidential. I
Well,
love
it has
that
to
one.
be, doesn't it, right?
Yeah, and as well, I've got to back myself. So yeah.
Yeah. And then when we talk about characters in LA Confidential, for everybody, the
Mhm.
guys or the band took the name from a character in LA Confidential. Guy Pearce versus Russell Crowe.
Guy Pearce. I think he's such a phenomenal actor, and I think
Mhm.
the way he brings that character to life is it's just really impressive. Yeah.
And I still think it's hard to believe that the one of the two who got an Oscar is Russell Crowe.
Yeah, it's wild. I think yeah, when you look at Guy Pearce's filmography, it's mad.
Yeah, and the other thing about that Oscar for Crowe is that he got it for maybe one of the worst movies he ever did. I mean, didn't he get it for Gladiator? So come on.
Yeah.
It should have been A Beautiful Mind, or it should have been The Inside Man, but not Gladiator. James, thanks for all the detailed answers. Thanks for all the fun and laughter. I always like that. As we are publishing this around Christmas, my last question is favorite Christmas track?
Last Christmas by Wham.
I will have to think about whether I will publish this interview. I,
It's such
I'll
a
tell you.
perfect, it's a
Yeah,
perfect
that.
pop song.
Yep. but you've said like you've heard that, what was it, Wonderwall too often? That's
Yeah.
just, and Last Christmas to me is the epitome of everything that is bad about pop music. But that I also have to say that because, again, heard too effing often. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And I even have a liking for Wham, but that song is like,
no, too much.
So, wish you a Merry Christmas, enjoy Christmas time, and give my love to the rest of the band, and of course, especially to Miss Corman.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yes.